I was 33 when my parents looked across the Christmas roast and told me to leave and never return. They delivered the ultimatum with a rehearsed calm, treating me like a stain on the family legacy. I walked out thinking the worst was over. But 5 minutes later, a bank seizure alert lit up my phone. I realized then that my exile wasn't a punishment. It was the opening move of a crime they had pinned entirely on me. I turned my car onto the familiar pavement of Maplewood Drive, the engine humming a low, steady note that felt like the only grounded thing in the world. It was 6:15 on Christmas Eve. The streetlights were already on, casting long orange shadows across the pristine lawns and the grand, colonial-style houses that lined the cul-de-sac. Every house was decorated with aggressive perfection, white lights draped over manicured hedges, wreaths centered perfectly on front doors. It was a neighborhood that prided itself on symmetry and silence. My parents lived at the very end of the street, in the largest house with the widest porch. I parked my sedan behind my father's brand-new luxury SUV, taking a moment to grip the steering wheel before I killed the engine. I was 33 years old, a grown woman with a career, an apartment, and a life that was entirely my own. Yet the moment the engine died, I felt the old, suffocating weight of being the daughter of Robert and Eleanor Griffin. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My lipstick was a neutral shade, applied with precision. My hair was pulled back in a severe, neat bun. I was wearing a charcoal wool coat over a navy dress, conservative, quiet, expensive enough to show I was stable, but modest enough not to look like I was showing off. It was a costume I wore only for them. On the passenger seat lay a small, rectangular box wrapped in silver paper with a white ribbon. Inside was a set of antique fountain pens for my father and a first-edition gardening book for my mother. Impersonal, thoughtful, and tasteful. I had spent 3 weeks searching for them, hoping that this year, the gifts would be enough to buy me a peaceful dinner. I stepped out into the biting wind. The air smelled of wood smoke and impending snow. I walked up the driveway, my heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete. I braced myself. I knew the script. They would comment on my shoes. Then they would ask about my job in a tone that suggested my work as a logistics manager was a temporary hobby. Then they would make a vague reference to my lack of a husband. I reached the door and rang the bell. I did not have a key. I had not had a key since I was 22. The door swung open, revealing my mother. She was wearing a red velvet dress that looked more appropriate for a gala than a family dinner. Her hair was a stiff, golden helmet of curls, and her smile was so bright it looked painful. "Lydia," she said. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. "You are late." I checked my watch. It was 6:18. "I thought dinner was at 6:30. I said, stepping into the foyer. "We said 6 o'clock for drinks." She replied, closing the door behind me. "But it is fine. We are just happy you decided to make time for us in your busy schedule." The house smelled of cinnamon and bleach. It was spotless. The hardwood floors gleamed under the crystal chandelier. To my right, in the living room, the Christmas tree stood 12 feet tall, decorated entirely in gold and glass ornaments. There was not a single sentimental decoration on it. No macaroni stars from my childhood. No mismatched bulbs. It was a showroom tree. I followed my mother into the living room. My father was standing by the fireplace, swirling a glass of scotch. He looked distinguished, as he always did, in a cashmere sweater and dark trousers. But he looked tight. His shoulders were hunched up toward his ears, and his eyes kept darting toward the hallway that led to his home office. "Hello? Dad?" I said. He looked at me, blinking as if he didn't recognize me for a second. "Lydia, good. You are here?" He took a sip of his drink, his eyes immediately sliding away from mine to check his wristwatch. He tapped the screen of his phone, which was resting on the mantelpiece, then put it back down face up. I noticed then that we were not alone. My Aunt Kathy and Uncle Dave were sitting on the beige sofa. Looking uncomfortable, they held their drinks with both hands, like protective talismans, and standing in the corner, near the entrance to the dining room, was a man I did not know. He was tall, perhaps 50 years old, wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny. He had a thick neck and eyes that moved slowly around the room, assessing everything. He didn't look like a friend. He looked like security. "Oh, this is Mr. Silas," my mother said, noticing my stare. "A dear family friend. He is helping your father with some consulting work for the foundation. He will be joining us for dinner. Mr. Silas nodded at me but did not smile. "A pleasure, Ms. Griffin," he said. His voice was gravelly and flat. I nodded back, feeling a prickle of unease run down my spine. My parents kept their social circles hermetically sealed. They never invited business associates to Christmas dinner. Christmas was for family, which meant it was for performance. I handed my mother the silver box. "Merry Christmas," I said. She took it without looking at it and placed it on the side table, next to a stack of unread magazines. "Thank you. Lydia, put your coat in the closet. We are sitting down immediately." The dining room was set for 6. The china was the good set, the one with the platinum rim. The centerpiece was a sprawling arrangement of winter berries and white roses. I took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, opposite my father. Mr. Silas sat to my father's right. Aunt Kathy and Uncle Dave sat across from each other in the middle. My mother sat at the other head of the table. The meal began with a shrimp cocktail that tasted like iodine. The conversation was stilted, driven entirely by my mother's frantic energy. She talked about the weather. She talked about the neighbor's new fence. She talked about the Hearthstone Community Fund, the charity organization she and my father had run for 15 years. "We have had our best year yet," she announced, beaming at Mr. Silas. "Donations are up 20%. The gala next month is going to be spectacular. We are finally going to break ground on the new youth center." "That is wonderful," Aunt Kathy mumbled, staring at her plate. My father didn't say anything. He was checking his phone again, holding it under the table. I saw the blue glow reflecting off his napkin. "Dad, is everything okay?" I asked. He snapped his head up. "Fine. Everything is fine. Just a work email." "On Christmas Eve?" I asked. "Important matters do not respect holidays." "Lydia." "Mr. Silas said. He was cutting his shrimp into tiny, precise pieces. His knife scraped screeching lines against the porcelain. The main course was roast beef, dry and overcooked. As my mother served the potatoes, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was heavy. The air felt pressurized, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. My Uncle Dave kept glancing at the front door. My father was sweating, a thin sheen of moisture on his upper lip despite the chill in the house. I looked around the table. "Why are we all so tense?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. My mother set the serving spoon down with a loud clatter. She looked at my father. He gave a barely perceptible nod. My mother clasped her hands in front of her. She took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling beneath the velvet dress. She turned her gaze on me. It was not a loving gaze. It was the look she used when she was returning a defective item to a store manager. "Lydia," she began, "we need to talk about the future." I put my fork down. "Okay, we have been discussing the family legacy," she said. "Your father and I have worked very hard to build a reputation in this town, the foundation, our standing in the community. It requires a certain level of excellence." I felt the old defensiveness rising in my throat, hot and familiar. I swallowed it down. "I am a logistics manager for a national shipping company." "Mother, I pay my own bills. I have never asked you for money. I don't understand how I am damaging your legacy. It is not about money." My father said, his voice was sharp, "It is about attitude. It is about loyalty. You have always been difficult." "Difficult," I repeated. "You are distant," my mother said. "You judge us. You refuse to participate in the foundation's events unless we beg you. You act as if you are better than us, as if our lives are beneath you." I looked at Aunt Kathy. She looked away. "I don't think that," I said quietly. "I just value my privacy." "Privacy?" Mr. Silas said. The word sounded like a curse coming from his mouth. My mother reached under the table and pulled out a white envelope. It was thick, sealed with a red wax stamp. She slid it across the tablecloth. It stopped just inches from my water glass. "What is this?" I asked. "It is a letter," my mother said, explaining our position. I reached for it, but she held up a hand. "Do not open it here," she said. "Then tell me what it says." My father cleared his throat. He looked at Mr. Silas, then back at me. "Lydia, we have come to a decision. We feel that your presence in our lives is disruptive. We are entering a new phase with the foundation, a phase that requires total unity, and frankly, your negative energy is a liability." I stared at him. "A liability? I'm your daughter, which is why this is so hard," my mother said, her voice trembling with a theatrical vibrato. "But we have to set a boundary, for our own health, for the good of the family." She looked me in the eye, and her expression went completely blank. It was a look of absolute, terrifying detachment. "We want you to leave, Lydia, tonight, and we do not want you to come back. Not for Easter, not for birthdays. We are cutting ties." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked at the faces around the table. Aunt Kathy was crying silently. Uncle Dave was staring at his roast beef. Mr. Silas was watching me with the intensity of a hawk watching a field mouse. "Leave and never return," I said, repeating the words to make sure I understood them. My father nodded. "It is for the best." I felt a scream building in my chest. I wanted to flip the table. I wanted to scream that I was the only one who had ever been honest with them. I wanted to demand to know why I was being discarded like trash over a roast beef dinner. But then I looked at Mr. Silas. I saw his hand resting on the table, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm. I saw my father's eyes, wide with panic. I saw the envelope, sitting there like a prop. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a maneuver. They were reading lines. If I screamed, I would be the crazy daughter. If I cried, I would be the unstable child they had always claimed I was. I took a breath. I held it for 3 seconds. Then I let it out. "Okay," I said. My mother blinked. "What?" I said, "Okay." I stood up slowly. I picked up my napkin and placed it neatly next to my plate. "If that is what you want, I will not argue with you at Christmas." I saw a flash of confusion on my mother's face. She had expected a fight. She had prepared for a scene. My compliance threw her off balance. I did not touch the envelope. I turned and walked out of the dining room. My legs felt numb, but I forced them to move steadily. I walked into the hallway, opened the closet, and took out my coat. I put it on. Buttoning it all the way to the top, I grabbed my purse. "Lydia, wait!" my mother called out from the dining room. Her voice sounded shrill. I did not wait. I opened the front door and stepped out into the cold. The wind hit me like a physical blow, freezing the tears that were threatening to form in my eyes. I walked down the path to the driveway. The Christmas lights on the bushes twinkled aggressively. I got into my car and locked the door. My hands were shaking now. I jammed the key into the ignition, but before I could turn it, my phone lit up in the cup holder. It buzzed aggressively against the plastic. I looked down. It was a notification from my bank app. "Alert, account status change." I frowned. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. I tapped on the notification. The screen loaded, displaying a red banner across the top of my banking dashboard. "Account ending in 4092 has been frozen by legal order." I stared at the screen. Account 4092? I didn't have an account ending in those numbers. My checking account ended in 551. My savings ended in 338. I tapped the details. Joint business checking. Primary holder, Lydia Griffin. Secondary holder, Hearthstone Community Fund. Balance, $250,000. Status, frozen/investigation. The world tilted on its axis. $250,000? Joint business checking? I had never opened a business account. I had never shared an account with the foundation. I pressed the call button for the bank's 24-hour service line. It rang once, twice. "Customer service," a voice said. "I just got an alert," I stammered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. About an account freeze. I think there is a mistake. I don't recognize the account number. One moment. Please, can you verify your full name? Lydia Marie Griffin. There was a pause. The sound of typing. Ms. Griffin, the representative said, her voice dropping to a serious, guarded tone. I can see the hold here. This account was flagged 40 minutes ago. It is a Level 1 seizure order. Seizure? By who? The note says it is from the State Attorney General's office, Division of Charities and Solicitation. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's impossible. I said, I am not involved with any charities. Ms. Griffin, your name is listed as the primary signatory and treasurer on this account. The freeze covers all linked assets. That includes your personal checking and savings as well. Since they are under the same Social Security number, my personal... Wait, I can't use my own money? I am sorry. Ma'am, everything is locked pending the review. You will need to contact the agency listed on the warrant. I ended the call. The silence in the car was deafening. I looked up at the house. The golden light spilled out from the dining room window. They knew this was happening. Movement caught my eye. The front door of the house flew open. A figure sprinted out. Not walking, but running. It was my cousin Sarah, Aunt Kathy's daughter. She was 19, breathless, her face pale in the porch light. She ran down the driveway to my car. I cracked the window. Lydia, she hissed. Lydia, you have to go. What is going on? I asked. Sarah looked back at the house. Police, she whispered. A black car just pulled up to the back alley entrance, and a lawyer. They came in the back door right after you left the room. They are in the kitchen. What? They are asking for you. Lydia, they asked Uncle Robert where you were. They have a paper. A warrant or a subpoena, I don't know. They asked for Lydia Griffin. My stomach dropped. They had kicked me out 5 minutes before the police arrived. They had staged the fight. They had staged the legacy conversation. They wanted me gone, I whispered. They didn't want me arrested in the dining room. No, Sarah said, shaking her head. No, Lydia. Uncle Robert told them you left hours ago. He told them you ran away. He said you were acting erratic and talking about fleeing the state. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They were setting the narrative. The unstable daughter. The flight risk. Go, Sarah said. Just go. She turned and ran back toward the house. I looked at the rearview mirror. In the reflection of the streetlights, I saw blue strobe lights bouncing off the snow-covered trees at the end of the block. A patrol car was turning into the cul-de-sac. They were coming to the front door now. I couldn't drive past them. If I backed out now, I would run right into the cruiser. I unlocked the door and scrambled out of the car. I couldn't be found here, not like this, not while I was confused and blind. I needed to think. I ran across the neighbor's lawn, ducking behind a row of thick pine trees. The snow was deep, soaking into my heels, freezing my ankles. I crouched behind a decorative snowman display, peering through the branches back at my parents' house. The police cruiser pulled up behind my car. 2 officers got out. They walked up to the front door. My father opened it. I could see him clearly. He looked devastated. He held his hands out in a gesture of helplessness. My mother appeared beside him, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. They looked like grieving parents. They pointed toward the street, toward the darkness, away from the house. They were telling the police I was gone. Then, the door opened wider. Mister. Silas stepped out. He didn't look at the police. He looked straight out at the street, scanning the darkness. He walked down the porch steps, past the officers, and stood by my car. He peered into the empty driver's seat. He looked at the snow. He turned his head slowly, scanning the neighbor's yards. He took out his phone and dialed a number. My phone, in my pocket, remained silent. I had silenced it, but I saw the screen light up. Unknown caller. He was calling me. I rejected the call. I tapped the contact for my friend Elena. She lived 3 towns over. She was a lawyer, not a criminal lawyer, but she was the only person I trusted. Pick up, I whispered. Please pick up. Lydia? Elena's voice was warm, surrounded by the noise of a party. Merry Christmas. Elena, I said. My voice was shaking. I need you to come get me. What? Where are you? I am down the street from my parents' house. I am hiding in a neighbor's yard. Hiding? Lydia, are you drunk? No. Listen to me. The police are at my parents' house. My bank accounts are frozen. My parents just told the police I am a fugitive. The party noise in the background stopped abruptly. Elena must have stepped into a quiet room. Tell me exactly where you are, she said. I told her the intersection. Stay out of sight, she said. I am leaving now. 20 minutes. I hung up. I watched from the darkness as the police officers entered my parents' house. Mr. Silas remained outside for a moment longer, staring at the spot where I was crouching, as if he could smell my fear. Then he turned and went back inside. I sat in the snow, my expensive coat soaking up the moisture. I was 33 years old. I had a perfect credit score. I had never broken a law in my life, and I was hiding behind a plastic snowman while my parents sold me to the state. I wasn't crying. The shock was too cold for tears. I was replaying the dinner, the envelope, the look in my mother's eyes, a liability. They hadn't just used my name. They had built an entire second life for me, a paper life, and filled it with their crimes. And tonight, they had decided it was time for that paper version of me to die so they could survive. I waited in the cold until Elena's beat-up station wagon rolled around the corner. I ran to it, keeping my head down, and jumped into the passenger seat. Drive, I said. She drove. We didn't speak until we were on the highway, miles away from the manicured lawns and the flashing blue lights. That night, I sat in Elena's guest room. The bed was soft. The room was warm. Elena had made me tea, but it sat untouched on the nightstand. I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, but I couldn't stop shaking. It wasn't the cold anymore. It was the violation. I thought about the envelope my mother had tried to give me, a final boundary. It wasn't a boundary. It was evidence. If I had taken it, if I had opened it, I would have put my fingerprints on whatever lie they had concocted. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I clenched them into fists. I was the difficult daughter, the ungrateful child, the distant relative. They thought those were my weaknesses. They thought my isolation made me vulnerable. They thought that because I was alone, I would be easy to break. They were wrong. I lay back against the pillows and stared at the ceiling. I would not sleep. I would not cry. I would wait for morning. And when the sun came up, I would find out exactly what they had done to my name, and then I would take it back. The morning sun hit the window of Elena's guest room with a brightness that felt offensive. I woke up with a headache that sat behind my eyes like a bruised weight. For a few seconds, I stared at the unfamiliar beige ceiling and thought I was back in my apartment. That the Christmas dinner had been a nightmare brought on by stress and loneliness. Then I saw my wool coat draped over the chair. The hem still stained with damp salt from the snow in my parents' neighbor's yard. And the reality crashed back down on me. I was not just the estranged daughter anymore. I was a person of interest. Elena came in 10 minutes later with coffee and a business card. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. I made a call, she said, handing me the mug. Marcus Thorne. He is a defense attorney who specializes in white-collar fraud and financial compliance. He is expecting us at 10 o'clock. I took the card. The name meant nothing to me, but the heavy, cream-colored stock felt serious. Do I really need a defense attorney? I asked. I haven't done anything. Elena sat on the edge of the bed. Her expression was grim. Lydia, your bank accounts are frozen by the state attorney general. You are not in a position to explain this away with a friendly chat. You need armor. Marcus Thorne's office was in a glass building downtown, far removed from the suburban quiet of my parents' neighborhood. The conference room was cold, smelling of leather and old paper. Thorne was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my car. He did not offer tea or sympathy. He laid a file folder on the mahogany table and opened it. I pulled some preliminary public filings this morning based on the information you gave Elena. He said. His voice was dry, devoid of emotion. Ms. Griffin, Are you aware that you are listed as the secretary and treasurer of the Hearthstone Community Fund? I stared at him. No, that is impossible. My mother runs the foundation. My father is the president. I have never attended a board meeting. Thorne slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a tax filing from 5 years ago. At the bottom, in the signature block, was a scrawl of black ink. "Is that your signature?" he asked. I looked closer. The loops were familiar. The sharp slant of the L. It looked like my handwriting, but it was shaky, hurried. "It looks like mine," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I didn't sign a tax return." I would remember signing a tax return. "Think back," Thorne said. 5 years ago. July. Did you sign anything for your parents? Anything at all? A birthday card? A permission slip? An insurance form? I closed my eyes, trying to dig through the silt of memory. 5 years ago. I was 28. I had just gotten a promotion at work. I was busy. I went to my parents' house for a 4th of July barbecue. It was hot. My father was at the grill. My mother was rushing around with trays of corn. Flashback memory. The kitchen island. My father wiping his hands on a towel. "Lydia, honey, while you are here, just sign this for the trust. It keeps your car insurance bundled with ours so the rate stays low." He told me it was for car insurance. I said, I opened my eyes. We were in the kitchen. He said he needed to bundle the policies. He put a piece of paper in front of me. I didn't read it. I just signed it so I could go back outside. Thorne nodded, as if this was exactly what he expected. That is a common tactic. The document of convenience. You thought you were saving $50 a month on premiums. In reality, you were authorizing your appointment as a corporate officer. He turned the page, and here, he said, "This is a resolution authorizing the opening of a secondary operating account. Signed by you, 3 years ago." I felt sick. I recognized that date too. Thanksgiving. "Just an update for the medical proxy, in case anything happens to us." They lied to me. I said, "Every time." Thorne leaned back in his chair. "In the eyes of the law, that does not matter as much as you think it does right now. Your signature is on the documents that authorize the movement of funds. The state is investigating the Hearthstone Community Fund for misappropriation of charitable assets, wire fraud, and tax evasion. And on paper, you are the one holding the checkbook." I looked at the stack of papers. It wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a cage. They had been building it around me for years, bar by bar, signature by signature, while I thought I was just being a dutiful daughter. "We need to get ahead of this," Thorne said. "We are going to request a meeting with the investigator. We are not going to wait for them to come to you. We are going to show them that you are confused, cooperative, and completely blind to the operations. But Lydia, you need to understand something." "What?" "Your parents are not your parents right now. They are co-defendants who have set you up to be the fall guy. If you try to protect them, you will go to prison." The meeting with the investigator took place 2 days later in a nondescript government building that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The investigator's name was Agent Miller. She was a woman of about 40 with a tight ponytail and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a human being could tell. She did not yell. She did not bang the table. She was polite, which was somehow more terrifying. "Ms. Griffin," she said, opening a laptop. "We have tracked $300,000 in donations that were withdrawn from the Foundation's accounts over the last 24 months. These withdrawals were marked as consulting fees and operational overhead. Can you explain who received these payments?" I looked at the spreadsheet she projected onto the wall. The numbers were staggering. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. I said, I did not know these accounts existed until Christmas Eve. Agent Miller tapped a key. A digital image appeared. It was a check for $12,000, made out to a company called Summit Strategic Solutions. It was signed by Lydia Griffin. I stared at the screen. The signature was a stamp. It was a perfect replica of my signature. But the ink density was too uniform. "That is a stamp." I said, "I do not own a signature stamp. Your mother says you do." Agent Miller said softly, We spoke to her yesterday. She claims you insisted on handling the bookkeeping from your apartment and that you used a stamp to save time because you were so busy with your day job. The air left my lungs. My mother had already given a statement. She had already painted the picture. My mother is lying. I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers hurt. I have never handled the bookkeeping. I have never invoiced a client. I work in logistics for a shipping company. I do not know what Summit Strategic Solutions is. Agent Miller looked at me for a long time. Then she looked at Thorne. Ms. Griffin, she said, I am going to be honest with you. You fit the profile of a straw man, a person put in place to absorb liability. But the law requires me to look at the evidence, and the evidence says you signed the checks, unless you can provide concrete proof that you were coerced or that these signatures were forged without your knowledge. You are looking at charges of facilitation. I am not a criminal. I said. Agent Miller closed the laptop. Then help us prove it. Give us everything. Emails, texts, calendars. If you are the victim, show me the trap. I walked out of that building feeling like I had been stripped naked. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I had turned it off during the meeting. When I powered it on, it buzzed continuously for a full minute. 17 text messages, all from my mother and father. I sat on a bench outside the government center and read them. The tone had shifted dramatically. Gone was the cold, imperious command to leave and never return. In its place was a frantic, cloying sweetness that made my skin crawl. Lydia, darling, please pick up. We are so worried about you. Dad says you ran off without your coat. It is freezing. Please come home. We need to handle this as a family. People are asking questions. We can fix this if we just sit down and talk. Don't talk to strangers about family business. Lydia, you do not understand the complexity of the situation. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Handle this as a family was code. It meant, come back so we can synchronize our lies. It meant, come back so we can make sure you don't say anything that incriminates us. I started typing a reply. My fingers hovered over the keys. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to ask how they could sleep at night. Thorne's hand touched my shoulder. Do not reply emotionally, he said. He was reading over my shoulder. I didn't even mind. Every word you type is evidence now. I deleted my draft. I typed a new message. I have retained counsel. Any questions regarding the foundation or my finances should be directed to Marcus Thorne. I want to see all documents bearing my signature immediately. I hit send. The response from my mother came less than 30 seconds later. The sweetness was gone. Lydia, stop this nonsense. You are having one of your episodes. You are paranoid. You have always misunderstood everything we try to do for you. If you bring lawyers into this, you will destroy this family. It is your mental state that is the problem. You are confused. I stared at the words. Episodes. Mental state. They were laying the groundwork for an insanity defense, not for themselves, but to discredit me if I testified. They would paint me as the hysterical, unstable daughter who hallucinated crimes and signed papers she didn't understand. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the message and emailed it to Thorne. Then I blocked their numbers. I spent the next 3 days in a fever state of reconstruction. I couldn't go to work. I had called in sick, claiming a family emergency, which was the truest thing I had ever said. I sat at Elena's dining room table, surrounded by legal pads and a laptop, trying to piece together the last decade of my life. I started with the Foundation's public face. I went to the library and pulled archives of the local newspaper. I found photos of the annual Hearthstone Gala. There were my parents, beaming in tuxedos and gowns, holding oversized checks, Robert and Eleanor Griffin, pillars of the community. I looked for myself in the photos. I was never there. I remembered why. Every year, around gala time, there was a fight, a perfectly timed argument about my weight, or my job, or my choice of boyfriend. They would pick a fight 2 days before the event. I would get upset and refuse to go, and they would go alone, playing the martyrs with the difficult daughter at home. It wasn't just pettiness, it was strategy. They didn't want me at the galas because they didn't want me talking to the donors. They didn't want anyone asking me. So, how is the Treasury doing this year? Lydia? I looked at the dates of the galas. They coincided perfectly with the withdrawals Agent Miller had shown me. The money came in from the donors, and within a week, chunks of it moved out to the shell accounts. The foundation wasn't just a charity, it was their piggy bank. It was how they paid for the renovations on the house. It was how they leased the luxury cars. It was how they maintained the image of wealth that allowed them to solicit more donations. And I was the firewall. I needed to know who else knew. I thought about my extended family, the aunts and uncles who sat around the Christmas table, watching me get exiled. I called Aunt Kathy. She didn't answer. I called her again. On the third try, she picked up. "Lydia," she whispered, "I can't talk long. Your mother is calling everyone. She says you have had a breakdown." "I haven't had a breakdown. Kathy, I found out they have been forging my signature on foundation documents for 5 years. I found out I am facing criminal charges for money they stole." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a heavy sigh. I told them it was a bad idea. Kathy said. Her voice sounded small, frightened. "You knew?" I didn't know the details. I just knew that they needed a name. Robert has that bankruptcy from the 90s. He couldn't be the treasurer. And Eleanor, well, you know Eleanor. She doesn't like her name on anything that could be audited. So they used mine. They said it was just for formalities. Lydia, they said you wouldn't mind. They said you owed them. Owed them? I asked, my voice rising. Owed them for what? For raising you? For everything. Look, Lydia, you have to understand. We all rely on the foundation. Your Uncle Dave's consulting contract? That's paid by Hearthstone. My car lease? Hearthstone. If you blow this up, if you go to the police, a lot of people are going to get hurt. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just my parents. It was the whole ecosystem. The entire family was feeding off this carcass, and I was the only one who hadn't been invited to the feast until it was time to pay the bill. You are telling me to take the fall. I said, you want me to go to prison so Uncle Dave can keep his consulting fees. Lydia, please, just come home. Apologize. Robert says he can fix it if you just sign a corrected affidavit. I hung up. I didn't want to hear the rest. I realized then that I had no family. I had a syndicate. I went back to the laptop. I needed hard evidence. Thorne had told me to find emails. I logged into my personal email account. I searched for Hearthstone. Nothing. I searched for bank. Just my personal statements. Then I remembered something. Years ago, when I was in college, my father had set up an email alias for me. Lydia G. Griffin Family, comma. He said it was for family coordination and sending out reunion invites. I hadn't used it in 10 years. I tried to log in. The password I remembered didn't work. I clicked Forgot Password. The recovery question popped up. What is the name of your first pet? I typed Buster. Password reset link, sent to your recovery email. I waited. A ping in my personal inbox. I clicked the link, reset the password to something complex, and logged in. The inbox was not empty. It was full. Thousands of emails. My hands shook as I scrolled. Confirmation of account opening. First City Bank. Change of address. Notification. DocuSign. Board Resolution 44A. Transfer confirmation. $12,000 to Summit Strategic Solutions. I opened one of the DocuSign emails. It showed that the document had been viewed and signed from an IP address. I checked the IP. I didn't recognize it, but I could guess where it was. I clicked on the Sent folder. There were hundreds of emails sent from me emails to the bank authorizing transfers, emails to vendors approving invoices. They were written in a voice that tried to sound like me, professional, slightly curt, but the syntax was my mother's. She used the word herewith 3 times in one email. I never used the word herewith. I downloaded everything, every PDF, every confirmation, every timestamp. This was the smoking gun. This proved that while I was at my job in the city, Lydia Griffin was active on a computer 30 miles away, moving thousands of dollars. But I needed one more thing. I needed a witness who wasn't blood. I looked through the vendor list in the emails. Most were shell companies, vaguely named consultants, but one name stood out. Janice Miller, bookkeeping services. She was a real person. I remembered her. She was a quiet woman with gray hair who used to come to the house on Tuesdays when I was a teenager. She would sit at the dining room table with my mother, sorting receipts. I found her number online. I didn't call. I drove to her office, a small storefront in a strip mall on the edge of town. It was late afternoon. The sign in the window said, "Open," but the lights were dim. I walked in. A bell chimed above the door. Janice was sitting behind a cluttered desk, staring at a computer screen. She looked older than I remembered. Her face was lined with exhaustion. When she looked up and saw me, she didn't look surprised. She looked resigned. "Hello? Lydia," she said. "You know why I am here." I said. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I heard about the freeze. I figured it was only a matter of time." "Janice," I said, stepping closer to the desk. "They are trying to say I did it. They are telling the state that I controlled the accounts." Janice let out a dry, bitter laugh. "You? You couldn't balance a checkbook when you were 16. No offense, honey, but you were never interested in the money. You just wanted to read your books. Then why?" I asked. "Why did you let them put my name on everything?" She looked at me, her eyes sad and tired. "I didn't let them do anything. Lydia, I work for them. They pay my invoices, or they used to." She opened a drawer and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She didn't light one, just held it in her fingers. "Your father. He is a charismatic man, but he is sloppy. He mixes everything, personal, business, charity. It's all one pot to him. Years ago, the IRS started sniffing around his personal accounts. He needed a clean slate, a new entity, but he couldn't be the officer. And your mother, she has a record too. A shoplifting charge from the 80s that she thinks nobody knows about, but it flags on background checks for financial boards, so they used me." I said, "Because I was invisible, because you were clean." Janice corrected, "You were perfect. Good grades, good job, no debts. You were the perfect front. They told me you knew. They said, 'Lydia is on board. She just doesn't want to be involved in the day-to-day.'" "And you believed them?" "I wanted to believe them," she said quietly. "I needed the work, and for a long time, it was just small stuff, moving money around to lower the tax bracket. But then, the lifestyle creep happened. The house needed a new roof. The country club dues went up. They started dipping into the scholarship fund. The scholarship fund? I felt a wave of nausea. They stopped awarding them 3 years ago," Janice said, "but they kept collecting the donations. They kept holding the scholarship gala. People gave money thinking it was going to send poor kids to college. Instead, it went to your mother's Neiman Marcus card." I stared at her. This wasn't just tax fraud. This was theft. They were stealing from people who believed in them. "Janice," I said, "I need you to tell this to the investigator." She shook her head rapidly. "No, no way. I am not going to jail. I signed those reports too. You are going to jail anyway if you don't talk." I said, "My lawyer says the first person to cooperate gets the deal. If my parents get to the prosecutor before you do, they will blame you too. They will say the bookkeeper and the daughter cooked the books together." Janice froze. She looked at the unlit cigarette in her hand. "They would do that," she whispered. "Eleanor would do that in a heartbeat." I leaned my hands on her desk. "I am not here for revenge. Janice, I don't want to hurt them, but I'm not going to let them destroy me. And I am not going to let them keep stealing from people. I have the emails. I have the IP logs. I can prove I wasn't there. But I need you to explain the numbers." She looked at me for a long, agonizing minute. Then she reached for a notepad and a pen. "I won't wear a wire," she said. "But if they subpoena me, I won't lie for them anymore. I'm tired. Lydia, I'm just so tired." She wrote down a name and a phone number. "This is the account manager at the bank who handled their special transactions. He knows it wasn't you. He only ever talked to Robert." I took the paper. "Thank you." I walked out of the storefront and into the gray winter dusk. The wind was picking up again. I sat in my car and looked at the piece of paper. I had the emails. I had the bookkeeper. I had the bank contact. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Handle this as a family. I looked at my phone. There were 3 new voicemails from my father. I didn't listen to them. I wasn't their daughter anymore. I wasn't their victim. I was the witness they never thought they would have to face. I put the car in gear and drove back toward Elena's house. I wasn't going to hide. I was going to turn on the lights, room by room, document by document, until there was nowhere left for the roaches to run. I would protect myself. I would protect the people they had cheated. And if that meant tearing down the house I grew up in, then I would bring the wrecking ball myself. I dialed Thorne's number. Marcus. I said when he answered, I have the emails. And I found the bookkeeper. We are ready to talk to the investigator again. Good. Thorne said. Get some sleep. Lydia. Tomorrow. We go on the offense. I hung up and watched the road ahead. The path was dark. But for the first time in my life, I knew exactly where I was going. The fluorescent lights in Marcus Thorne's office hummed with a low, electric buzz that seemed to match the vibration in my skull. It had been 4 days since Christmas. 4 days since I had become a fugitive in my own life. Thorne sat across from me, his desk covered in stacks of paper that smelled of toner and dry heat. He picked up a document, his movements precise and surgical. We have received the initial transaction logs from the bank, he said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man who had seen financial ruin 1,000 times before. It is cleaner than I expected, which is bad news. Cleaner? I asked. How can fraud be clean? Because it was designed to look boring, he said. He slid a sheet of paper toward me. It was a list of vendor payments made by the Hearthstone Community Fund over the last 3 years. I scanned the names: Civic Strategy Partners, Regional Logistics Group, Greenleaf Consulting, Apex Administrative Solutions. They sound like real companies. I said, Exactly, Thorne said. They sound like the kind of line items an auditor skips over because they look mundane. But we ran a check on the business registrations. Civic Strategy Partners is registered to a P.O. box in a strip mall in Delaware. Greenleaf Consulting has an address that corresponds to a vacant lot in an industrial park 3 towns over. I looked at the amounts: $5,000, $8,000, $3,500, small enough to avoid immediate flags, but frequent enough to bleed the account dry. And here is the kicker, Thorne said, tapping a line item near the bottom. Apex Administrative Solutions. Do you know who the registered agent is? I shook my head. A man named Thomas Silas. He said. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Silas, the family friend at Christmas dinner, the man who had watched me from the porch while I hid in the snow. He is their consultant. I whispered, he is their laundryman. Thorne corrected. He sets up the shell companies, invoices the foundation for non-existent services, and then, I suspect, funnels the cash back to your parents, minus his fee. And every single check to these companies was signed by you. I felt the familiar wave of nausea, but I didn't sign them. We know that, Thorne said. But we have to prove it. And there is something else. He opened a second folder. This one was thinner, but the label on the tab made my breath catch in my throat. Property title search. He pulled out a deed. It was a copy of a land transfer record from 4 years ago. Do you recognize this property? He asked. I looked at the address. 442 Pine Ridge Road. My heart hammered against my ribs. That is the cabin, I said. My grandparents' cabin. It was left to me and my father jointly when my grandmother passed away. It was my sanctuary, a small, drafty A-frame near the lake where I had spent the only happy summers of my childhood. It was the one place where the air didn't feel heavy with expectation. Thorne pointed to a clause on the second page. 4 years ago, this property was used as collateral for a commercial line of credit opened by the Hearthstone Community Fund. The loan was for $150,000. I stared at the paper. I never agreed to that. I would never risk the cabin. The document says you did. Thorne said. It lists you as the co-owner consenting to the lien. And because the foundation defaulted on the interest payments last month, just before the Christmas blowout, the bank has initiated foreclosure proceedings on the cabin. Foreclosure? I felt tears pricking my eyes. Hot and sudden. They are taking the cabin? Thorne nodded. It explains the timing. Lydia, your parents knew the foreclosure notice was coming. They knew the bank would start sending certified letters to you. Since you are on the deed, they had to get you out of the picture before you opened the mail. The ultimatum at Christmas wasn't just about emotional manipulation. It was an eviction notice to keep you away from the mailbox. I slumped back in the chair. It wasn't just money. They had taken the one thing my grandmother had left me. The one place that felt safe, and they had fed it into their machine. I want it back, I said. My voice sounded jagged. We will try, Thorne said. But first, we have to survive the meeting. The meeting? Your parents contacted me this morning, he said. They want a family summit. Tonight, they claim they want to clear the air and find a path forward without legal escalation. I laughed. A harsh, dry sound. They want to corner me. Yes, Thorne said. But I think you should go. Why? Because we need to see what narrative they are pushing, and we need them to say things on the record. He leaned forward. But you do not go alone. You go with a recording app running on your phone. Check your state laws. We are a one-party consent state. So you are clear. You do not sign anything. You do not agree to anything. And you leave the moment you feel unsafe. The meeting was set for 7 o'clock at the Olive Branch, a mid-range Italian restaurant on the north side of town. It was the kind of place my parents loved. Neutral, respectable, with linen tablecloths that hid the cheap particle board of the tables underneath. I arrived at 6:55. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching the entrance. I saw my father's SUV parked near the front. I checked my phone. The recording app was open. I pressed the red button. Recording started. I slipped the phone into the breast pocket of my blazer, the microphone facing out. I walked inside. The hostess led me to a private room in the back. Of course, they wouldn't want witnesses. I opened the door. They were all there. My mother, my father, Aunt Kathy, Uncle Dave, and, sitting in the corner again, Mr. Silas. My mother stood up as I entered. She was wearing a soft pink sweater, her hair loose and waved. She looked approachable, maternal. It was a costume change from the velvet armor of Christmas Eve. Lydia, she said, reaching out as if to hug me. I stepped back. I am not here for hugs. Mother. I sat down at the empty chair at the end of the table, keeping the door to my back. My father cleared his throat. He looked tired. There were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. We are glad you came. Lydia, he said, we know things got heated at Christmas. We want to apologize for the tone. We were under a lot of stress. Stress, I repeated. Is that what you call it? Lydia. Please, Uncle Dave said. He was leaning forward, his elbows on the table. We are a family. Families fight, but we don't bring strangers into our business. We don't hire lawyers to attack our own blood. I looked at Uncle Dave. He was the one who had taught me how to fish at the cabin. Now he was looking at me like I was a bomb that needed to be defused. I didn't hire a lawyer to attack you. I said, I hired a lawyer because my bank accounts are frozen, and the police are asking why I authorized payments to shell companies I have never heard of. My father held up a hand. Lower your voice, please. Then tell me the truth. I said, the truth, my father said, adopting his boardroom voice, the one he used when he was trying to sell a bad idea to a skeptical donor. The truth is that running a foundation is complex, sometimes. To move quickly, we have to take administrative shortcuts. Shortcuts? I asked, like forging my signature? We didn't forge anything. My mother cut in. Her voice was sharp, the sweetness evaporating instantly. You gave us permission, years ago. You said, Mom, Dad, do whatever you need to do. I trust you. Do you remember that? I remember saying I trusted you. I said, I don't remember saying you could mortgage Grandma's cabin to pay a consultant named Mr. Silas. Mr. Silas didn't move. He just watched me, his eyes heavy-lidded. The cabin is safe, my father lied. We are handling the payments. It is just a liquidity issue. The bank says it is in foreclosure. Dad? My father flinched. Who told you that? My lawyer? The table went silent. The word lawyer hung in the air like smoke. Lydia, my mother said. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. Listen to me. If you cooperate, if you just sign a statement saying that you were aware of the general strategy, that you authorized us to act as your agents, we can make this go away. We can unfreeze your accounts tomorrow. You can have your money back. You can still have a place here. I stared at her. There it was, the transaction. And if I don't? I asked. She sighed. A long, tragic sound. Then we can't protect you. The state is looking for someone to blame. Lydia. And right now, all the paperwork points to you. We are trying to save you from your own mistakes. My mistakes. I said, yes, she said. Your lack of attention, your distance. If you had been more involved, maybe you would understand how these things work. I looked around the table. Aunt Kathy was staring at her napkin, shredding it into tiny white piles. Aunt Kathy. I said, you knew about this? Kathy looked up. Her eyes were red. Lydia, honey, we all thought it was for the best. You were always, well, she trailed off. Always what? I asked. You were the backup plan. Uncle Dave blurted out, Dave! My father snapped. No, let her hear it, Dave said, his face flushing red. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and resentment. You were the only one with a clean record. Lydia, the rest of us. We all have dings, bad credit, old lawsuits. You were the golden child. We thought you could handle the scrutiny if it ever came. We didn't think you would turn on us. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a niece. I was an asset. I was a credit score with a pulse. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. Sit down. Lydia. Mr. Silas rumbled. It was the first time he had spoken. I looked at him. No. I turned to my parents. I am not signing anything. I am not admitting to crimes I didn't commit. Lydia, if you walk out that door, you are on your own, my father said. His voice was no longer rehearsed. It was cold, dead. We will testify that you were the mastermind. We will tell them you stole the money to fund a secret gambling habit. Or drugs. We will destroy your reputation. Go ahead. I said. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I held it up so they could see the red timer counting the seconds. What is that? My mother asked. I am recording. I said, one-party consent. I have you on tape admitting that the cabin is in foreclosure, that you used me as a backup plan, and that you are threatening to perjure yourselves to frame me. My mother's face went white. My father half rose from his chair, his hand reaching out. Give me that phone, he roared. I stepped back toward the door. I don't think so. I opened the door and walked out. I didn't look back. I heard my father shouting my name, but I kept walking, past the hostess stand, past the families eating their pasta, out into the cold night air. I got into my car and locked the doors. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't get the key into the ignition. I sat there for a moment, breathing in the smell of freezing vinyl. I had the recording, but more importantly, I had the truth. They didn't love me. They didn't even like me. They had kept me around, kept me close enough to touch, but far enough to be ignorant, solely so they could harvest my identity when the time came. I started the car and drove. I didn't go back to Elena's. I needed to see the numbers. The next morning, I met Janice, the bookkeeper, at a coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked even more exhausted than before. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. This is it, she said, the internal ledger. Not the one we showed the IRS, the real one. I opened it. It was a spreadsheet, printed in landscape mode, thousands of rows. I started tracing the withdrawals. August 12th, withdrawal, $8,000. Label. Consultant fee. Greenleaf. August 14th. Payment. Griffin Residence. Kitchen contractor. September 1st. Withdrawal. $12,000. Label. Strategic planning. September 3rd. Payment. Saint. Jude's Academy. Tuition. S. Griffin. I stopped. S. Griffin. That was Sarah. My cousin Sarah. The one who had warned me in the driveway. Her private school tuition was being paid with money stolen from a charity. Laundered through a shell company in my name. I kept reading. November 10th. Withdrawal. $25,000. Label. Donor Relations Retreat. November 12th. Payment. The Royal Cabo Resort. Suite booking. A luxury vacation. They had gone to Cabo for 2 weeks in November. They told me they were going to a non-profit summit in Arizona. The anger I felt wasn't hot anymore. It was cold. It was precise. Janice. I said, "This proves everything. It links the theft directly to their personal expenses. It proves they spent the money." Janice said, "But it doesn't prove you didn't authorize it. They will say you paid for their kitchen because you are a generous daughter. They will say you paid for Sarah's school because you are a loving cousin. I need to prove I didn't know." I said, I kept scrolling. Then I saw it. A line item from 3 years ago. October 4th. Withdrawal. $2,000. Label. Scholarship. K.M. K.M.? I asked. "Who is K.M.?" Janice frowned. I don't know. That was a manual entry your father made. He said it was a direct scholarship for a local kid. Kevin. Something. I looked at the date. October. I remembered something. A conversation I overheard at the grocery store months ago. A woman complaining that her son, Kevin, had been promised help from the Hearthstone Fund for his trade school books. But the check never arrived. If this money went out, but the kid never got it. I said, "Then where did it go?" Janice asked. I traced the transaction ID. It didn't go to a school. It didn't go to a Kevin. It went to a cash withdrawal at an ATM in a casino 3 hours away. $2,000. Cash. At a casino. My father had a gambling problem? No. He was too controlled for that. Unless it wasn't gambling. Unless it was a debt. I closed the folder. I have enough. I said. That night, back at Elena's, I sat on the floor of the guest room with my old phone. I had dug it out of a box in my storage unit earlier that day. It was an old model, cracked screen, battery barely holding a charge. I powered it up. It took 5 minutes to boot. I went to the voicemail tab. I scrolled down, past the messages from my boss, past the appointment reminders. There was one saved message, dated 4 years ago. Grandma. My grandmother had died 3 months after this call. I pressed play. I held the phone to my ear. Lydia, honey. Her voice crackled through the speaker. Thin and reedy, but sharp as ever. It's Grandma. I just wanted to tell you. Your father was here today. He brought some papers about the cabin. I didn't sign them. Liddy, I told him no, but he was looking at you. Looking at your signature on that birthday card you sent me. You be careful, honey. You keep your name off their paperwork. They have appetites. Your parents, they always have. Don't let them eat you to fill themselves up. I love you. The message ended. I sat in the silence, the tears finally falling. She knew. She had seen it coming. Don't let them eat you. They had waited until she was dead. Then they had forged her signature too. Probably. Or just used mine to override the deed once the estate was settled. I wiped my face. I saved the audio file. I emailed it to Thorne. I emailed it to myself. I saved it to the cloud. This wasn't just evidence. It was a blessing. It was permission. The next day, the investigators made their move. I was at Thorne's office when the news broke. Agent Miller had executed a search warrant on the Foundation's office, which was just a rented room in a business center, and my parents' home. Thorne got the call from the state attorney's office. They seized laptops, phones, and physical files. Thorne said, hanging up the phone, Your parents are claiming harassment. They are telling anyone who will listen that their daughter has had a psychotic break and is weaponizing the state against them. Let them talk. I said. They are doing more than talking. Thorne said. They are rallying the troops. He showed me a Facebook post. It was from Aunt Kathy. Please pray for our family. We are under attack by lies and confusion. It is heartbreaking when a child loses their way and tries to destroy the people who raised them. We stand with Robert and Eleanor. The comments were full of support. Stay strong. So sad when mental illness tears families apart. They were winning the court of public opinion. They were painting me as the villain, the ungrateful, crazy daughter. I felt a surge of panic. Maybe I should say something. Maybe I should post the recording. No, Thorne said. We do not try this case on Facebook. We try it in the hearing room. Let them dig their hole. Every lie they post is another contradiction we can use later. I went to stay with Elena again. She was in the kitchen, making tea. Lydia, she said gently, you look like you haven't slept in a week. I haven't. Maybe you should step back, she said. Just for a day. Let the lawyers handle it. You are destroying yourself over this. Is it worth it? Maybe you should just negotiate. Get your name off, pay a fine, and walk away. I looked at her. I loved Elena. She was trying to protect my peace, but she didn't understand. I can't walk away. Elena, why not? Because of Kevin. I said, Kevin? The kid, the one with the scholarship. I found a line item, K.M., $2,000. It was withdrawn as cash at a casino. So that money was supposed to help a kid go to school, a real kid. My parents didn't just steal from faceless donors. They stole a future. And if I walk away, if I negotiate, that kid never gets justice, and neither do I. I pulled out my laptop. I opened the file Janice had given me. I am going to cooperate fully. I said, I am going to give Agent Miller the spreadsheet. I am going to give her the recording of the meeting. I'm going to give her the voicemail. But your family, Elena said, if you do that, there is no going back. They will hate you forever. They already hate me. I said, they hated me the moment I became inconvenient. I hit send on the email to Agent Miller. Subject: Supplemental evidence. Witness statement and internal ledgers. I watched the progress bar. Sent. It was done. I had severed the limb. I walked to the window and looked out at the street. It was snowing again. The world looked clean, white, and silent. I was alone. I had no parents. I had no aunts or uncles. I had no Christmas dinner to go to next year. But for the first time in 33 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light. I was no longer the difficult daughter. I was the witness, and I was ready to testify. The coffee shop was located in a strip mall on the south side of town. Far from the manicured lawns of my parents' neighborhood, it was the kind of place with laminate tables and fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects. I sat in a booth near the back, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm tea, waiting for a woman I had never met but whose name I knew by heart. Mrs. Higgins walked in 5 minutes late. She looked exhausted in a way that sleep could not fix. Her coat was worn at the elbows, and she carried a heavy tote bag that seemed to pull her shoulder down. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me with a mixture of suspicion and resignation. "Lydia Griffin?" she asked, sliding into the booth opposite me. "Yes," I said. "Thank you for meeting me." She didn't take off her coat. She just looked at me. "You look like him. Your father. You have the same eyes." I flinched. I know. Mrs. Higgins was the mother of Kevin, the boy whose initials I had found in the ledger next to a cash withdrawal at a casino. I had tracked her down through a convoluted search of public school board meeting minutes where she had publicly thanked the Hearthstone Community Fund 3 years ago, prematurely. It turned out, "I am not here to ask for money," she said, her voice flat. "I gave up on that a long time ago. I am not here to offer money." I said, "I am here to find out what happened." My records show a scholarship was issued to Kevin 3 years ago, $2,000. Mrs. Higgins laughed. A dry, brittle sound. Issued. That is a nice word. We got a letter. A big, fancy letter with gold foil on the top. It said Kevin had been selected for the Hearthstone VocTech grant. We were so happy. Kevin wanted to be an HVAC technician. The tools and the certification cost $1,800. We didn't have it. So the letter promised the money? It promised a check. She said, it said we had to attend a ceremony first. A dinner. We went. We bought Kevin a tie. We stood there while your father gave a speech about empowering the youth. He shook Kevin's hand. They took a picture. Your mother told me she was so proud to help a local family. And then? And then we went home and waited for the check. A week went by. 2 weeks. I called the foundation office. Your mother answered. She was so sweet. She said it was processing, just a clerical delay. Another month went by. Classes started. Kevin didn't have his tools. He couldn't enroll. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. What did you do? I went to their house. Mrs. Higgins said, I knocked on the door. Your father came out. He wasn't smiling anymore. He told me I was harassing them. He said the board was reviewing Kevin's eligibility and that if I made a scene, they would blacklist us from every charity in the county. She looked down at her hands. Kevin missed the semester. He got a job at a warehouse instead. He never went back to school. He's 21 now. He is just tired. We are all tired. She looked up at me, and her eyes were not angry. They were just empty. Why are you asking me this now? She asked. 3 years too late? Because they are saying I was the treasurer. I said, they are saying I signed the checks. I need to prove I didn't know. Mrs. Higgins stood up. She picked up her bag. It doesn't matter if you knew or not. She said, you were on the brochures. We trusted the name. You can't separate the name from the damage. Ms. Griffin. She walked out, leaving me alone with the cold tea and the crushing weight of a guilt that wasn't legally mine, but felt entirely personal. The meeting with Marcus Thorne the next morning was clinical. He listened to my recording of the conversation with Mrs. Higgins without blinking. It is powerful, he said, but it is emotional. The law deals in intent and authorization. We need to pivot. Pivot to what? I asked. Informed consent, Thorne said. He stood up and began pacing his office. The prosecution's narrative is that you were the passive partner, the one who signed whatever was put in front of her. Our defense must be that you were not passive. You were deceived. We have to prove that your consent was manufactured through fraud. He pulled a file from his desk. We subpoenaed the Postal Service records, he said. This is standard procedure in identity theft cases, which is essentially what this is. Look at this. He handed me a photocopy of a change of address form. It was dated 5 years ago, May 15th. I looked at the signature. It was a crude approximation of mine. Request to forward mail. Lydia Griffin. Forwarding address. Post Office Box, 492, May 15th. I whispered, I was in Europe. My job sent me to London for 6 weeks to oversee a merger. Exactly, Thorne said. And for those 6 weeks, your mail, your bank statements, your credit card offers, your tax notices, didn't go to your apartment. It went to a P.O. box registered to the Hearthstone Community Fund. I stared at the document. They had diverted my mail. This is how they did it, Thorne said. This is how they opened the accounts without you seeing the welcome packets. This is how they intercepted the initial inquiries from the IRS. They didn't just hope you wouldn't notice. They built a wall around you so you couldn't notice. I felt a cold shiver crawl up my spine. This wasn't financial mismanagement. This was stalking. My parents had monitored my location, waited for me to leave the country, and then systematically hijacked my identity. It is a federal crime. Thorne said, mail fraud, and since your father signed the payment for the P.O. box rental, we can link him directly to the interception. I looked at the date again, May. I remembered coming home from London. My parents had picked me up at the airport. They had brought flowers. My mother had hugged me and told me she missed me, all while she had the key to a P.O. box stuffed with my stolen life in her purse. 2 days later, my father reached out. He didn't call. He sent a text, simple and devoid of the hysteria my mother usually employed. Coffee? Just us. Starbucks on Main. 10 minutes? I have a solution. I showed the text to Thorne. Go, he said. But take the recording device, and do not drink the coffee. I walked into the Starbucks with my heart hammering against my ribs. My father was sitting at a small table in the corner, nursing a black coffee. He looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped, and the arrogance that usually defined his posture was gone, replaced by a jittery energy. Lydia, he said when I approached. He didn't stand up. Sit down. I sat. I kept my coat on. I don't have much time. Dad. He nodded, looking around the cafe to ensure no one was listening. I know you are angry. You have every right to be. Your mother. She gets carried away. She panics. And you don't? I asked. I am a pragmatist. Lydia, I look for solutions. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was crisp, white, and terrifyingly simple. I talked to the board. He said, we can fix the accounting errors. It turns out the withdrawals were just misclassified. We can recategorize them as deferred compensation for your time as a board member. He slid the paper toward me. This is a retroactive service agreement, he said. It says that for the last 5 years, you have been acting as a consultant for the foundation and that the payments were your salary. If you sign this, the fraud charges vanish. It becomes a tax issue. We pay the back taxes, pay a fine, and it is over. You get to keep the money in the frozen account. I looked at the document. It was dated 5 years ago. Consulting agreement between Hearthstone Community Fund and Lydia Griffin. You want me to lie. I said, you want me to say I took the money. It saves everyone. Lydia. It saves the foundation. It saves the cabin. It saves you from a public trial. I looked at him, really looked at him. There was no love in his eyes. There was only calculation. He was trying to buy my silence with my own reputation. If I sign this, I said, I admit to receiving $300,000 of charitable funds as personal income. I admit that I took money meant for scholarships and used it to pay for Sarah's tuition and your kitchen renovation. Technically, yes, he said, but we will pay the taxes. You won't be out a dime. I will be out my integrity. I said, I will be the woman who stole from charity. Nobody cares about integrity. Lydia, he hissed, his voice rising. They care about closure. This ends it. Today. I stood up. It ends when you tell the truth. Dad, not when I sign a lie. I turned to leave. Lydia. He called after me, his voice dropping to a desperate growl. If you walk away, you are burning the house down with you inside it. I kept walking. The retaliation was swift. The next afternoon, I was called into the office of my boss, the vice president of operations. He was a stern man who valued efficiency above all else. He looked uncomfortable. Lydia, close the door, he said. I sat down. We received a call today. He said, from your mother. My stomach dropped. I am so sorry. Mike? I told them not to contact me here. She was very distraught, he said. She expressed concern about your stability. She claimed you have been suffering from paranoid delusions and that you might be a danger to yourself or others in the workplace. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were trying to get me fired. They were trying to cut off my income so I couldn't pay Thorne. Mike, I said, keeping my voice steady. My parents are currently under investigation by the State Attorney General for fraud. I am a key witness against them. This is an intimidation tactic. He looked at me, surprised. Fraud? I can provide you with a letter from my attorney explaining the situation. I am perfectly sane. I am perfectly capable of doing my job. They are trying to discredit me because I found out they were stealing. He nodded slowly. I see. Well, that provides some context. I will have the letter to you by the end of the day. I said. I walked back to my desk, shaking with rage. This was the nuclear option. My mother knew how much I prided myself on my career. It was the one thing I had built without them. I called Thorne. Send the cease and desist, I said, to my parents, to the board. To anyone who will listen. If she calls my job again, I will sue her for defamation." "We will do it," Thorne said. "But Lydia, this means they are scared. They are throwing everything at the wall. We needed a visual." Thorne kept saying that juries get bored with spreadsheets, but they remember images. I spent my nights scouring the internet for photos of past galas. I found a local event photographer who had covered the Hearthstone Winter Ball 2 years ago. I emailed him, offering to pay for his raw footage. He sent me a link to a cloud drive. Unedited B-roll. I sat in Elena's living room, watching hours of footage. People drinking champagne. My mother laughing with the mayor. My father shaking hands. Then I saw it. Timestamp. 8:42 p.m. The camera was panning across the room, in the background, near the coat check. My father and I were standing at a high-top table. I zoomed in. In the video, I was holding a glass of wine, looking bored. My father was holding a stack of papers. He was talking fast, gesturing. He laid the papers on the table. I reached for a pen. As I leaned in to sign, my father shifted his body. He moved his left arm across the top half of the paper. Blocking the text, he pointed to the signature line at the bottom with his right hand. I hesitated. I tried to lift the corner of the paper to read what was underneath. My father put his hand firmly on the paper, holding it down. He said something that made me laugh. A distraction. He tapped the signature line again. Urgently, I signed. Immediately. He snatched the paper away, slid it into his inside jacket pocket, and patted my shoulder. He handed me another glass of wine. I watched it 3 times. It was a magic trick, a sleight of hand. He had physically obscured the document while I signed it. I clipped the segment and sent it to Thorne. Subject: proof of concealment. It wasn't just a bad memory, it was video evidence of him tricking me. The next day, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Lydia?" The voice was rough, familiar. It took me a moment. "Aunt Meredith?" I asked. Meredith was my mother's older sister, the family black sheep. She hadn't been invited to Christmas in 10 years. I hadn't spoken to her since I was in college. "I heard you are finally burning it down." She said, "Word travels fast." I said, "Kathy called me." Meredith said, "She wanted me to call you and tell you to stop. She said you are ruining the family name. And are you going to tell me to stop?" Meredith laughed, a sound like gravel in a mixer. "Hell no. I called to tell you I want in." "In? I want to talk to your lawyer. I want to tell him about the loans." "What loans?" 10 years ago, Meredith said. "I caught Robert, your father, skimming from the construction budget for the new library wing. He was using cheap materials and billing for premium. I told him I was going to the board, and he offered me a loan." She said, $20,000, interest-free, indefinite repayment terms. The money came from a vendor account called Structural Integrity Consultants. She paused. I took it. "Lydia, I needed the money. I had debts. And the condition was that I kept my mouth shut and stayed away from the family. That is why I am estranged. They paid me to disappear." "My God," I whispered. "But I kept the paperwork." She said, "I have the promissory note. It is signed by Robert, and the check came from the foundation." "Can you testify?" I asked. "I am ready," she said. "I am tired of being the secret they keep in the closet, and I am tired of watching them treat you like the golden goose while they act like vultures." I gave her Thorne's number. When I hung up, I felt a strange sense of relief. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the crazy daughter. I was just the latest victim in a long line of casualties. The investigation was moving faster now. Agent Miller called us in for an update. We traced the IP addresses for the Summit Strategic Solutions vendor account. She said, "We thought it was a dead end, but we found a link." She projected a photo onto the wall. It was a man in his 60s. Silver hair. Expensive suit. "Not Mr. Silas. Someone else. This is Arthur Sterling," she said. "He is a disbarred attorney who operates out of the Cayman Islands. He specializes in setting up charitable trusts for high-net-worth individuals who want to hide assets. We found email correspondence between your father and Sterling dating back 7 years. She continued, Sterling didn't just set up the accounts. He wrote a script. A script? I asked. Literally. She said, we found a document titled Asset Protection Strategy. It outlines exactly how to use a family member as a nominee director. It lists the steps. Select a dependent with a clean history. Obtain power of attorney via insurance bundling. Divert correspondence. I felt sick. It wasn't an improvisation. It wasn't a desperate mistake. It was a purchased product. My parents had paid a consultant to teach them how to frame me. Your parents weren't improvising, Thorne said, reading the file. They were following a manual. The pressure from the board became suffocating. They requested a mediation session. One last chance to settle this with dignity. They called it, Thorne advised me to go. We need to hear their final offer so we can reject it on the record, he said. We met in a conference room at a high-end law firm downtown. The table was long and polished. My parents were there, sitting at the far end. They didn't look at me. The chairman of the board, a man named Mr. Henderson, spoke first. Lydia, he said, his voice dripping with condescension, we are all victims here. The foundation has suffered a terrible blow to its reputation. We need to stop the bleeding. What do you propose? Thorne asked. Henderson slid a document across the table. We are willing to issue a statement. He said, it will say that there were administrative errors made during a period of rapid growth. It will state that the treasurer, Lydia, was overwhelmed and made mistakes in good faith. The foundation will repay the funds. Lydia will resign. No charges will be pressed. And the fraud? I asked. The shell companies? The stolen scholarships? Clerical errors. Henderson said, we will handle the cleanup internally. I looked at the document. It was a confession. It was a suicide note for my reputation. If I signed this, I would never work in finance or logistics again. I would be branded as incompetent at best, a thief at worst. And my parents? I asked. What happens to them? Robert and Eleanor will transition to honorary advisory roles, Henderson said, to ensure continuity. I laughed. I couldn't help it. So I take the blame. I resign in disgrace, and they get a retirement party? It protects the donors. Lydia, my mother said. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were pleading, but it was a selfish pleading. Think of the charity. Think of the good work we do. If you expose this, the foundation collapses. The poor people suffer. I thought of Mrs. Higgins. I thought of Kevin, working in a warehouse because his scholarship money went to a casino. The poor people are already suffering. Mother, I said, because you stole from them. I stood up. I will not sign this. I said, I will not accept blame for crimes I didn't commit. And I will not protect a legacy that is built on rot. Lydia, be reasonable, Henderson shouted. I am being reasonable, I said. I am telling the truth. I walked out. Thorne followed me. That night, the grief hit me. It wasn't a sharp pain. It was a heavy, dull ache that settled in my bones. I sat on the floor of Elena's guest room, surrounded by the evidence of my parents' betrayal, the videos, the emails, the ledgers. I realized I was mourning a fantasy. For 33 years, I had believed that if I was just good enough, if I was just quiet enough, if I achieved enough, they would finally see me. I thought my distance was the problem. I thought my difficulty was the barrier. But there was no barrier. There was only a mirror. They saw me perfectly. They saw a tool. They saw a resource. They didn't love me. They couldn't love me. They were incapable of loving anything that they couldn't control or monetize. I cried for the little girl who had waited by the window for them to come home. I cried for the teenager who had signed the papers because she wanted to be helpful. I cried for the woman who had brought a gift to Christmas dinner hoping for a peaceful meal. And then, I stopped. I washed my face. I looked in the mirror. I was alone, but I was clean. I hadn't stolen anything. I hadn't lied. I hadn't used anyone. I could be proud of that. I didn't need their pride. I had my own. The next morning, the courier arrived. It was a package from the foundation's PR firm. It was addressed to me, but also carbon copied to the local newspaper and the state attorney. I opened it. It was a draft press release. For immediate release, Hearthstone Community Fund announces restructuring following internal audit. The Board of Directors has identified significant administrative irregularities in the Treasury Department, overseen by Ms. Lydia Griffin. The audit reveals that Ms. Griffin, acting independently, directed funds to unauthorized vendors. The board is cooperating fully with authorities to recover the assets misplaced by Ms. Griffin's administrative errors. I stared at the paper. Acting independently. Misplaced by Ms. Griffin. They were doing it. They weren't waiting for the hearing. They were going to release this statement today. They were going to convict me in the press before I even stepped foot in a courtroom. It was the final betrayal. They were willing to destroy my life publicly, permanently, just to buy themselves a few more months of freedom. I handed the paper to Thorne. They are running the story, I said. Thorne read it. His jaw tightened. Then we have to beat them to the microphone, he said. He picked up the phone. Get Agent Miller, he said to his receptionist, and get the press. We are filing the motion to dismiss based on fraud, and we are attaching the video. I looked at the draft statement one last time. Ms. Griffin's administrative errors. No. I thought, my only error was trusting you, and I am done making mistakes. We did not wait for their press release to hit the news cycle. We moved first. Marcus Thorne called it the packet of coercion. It was a 3-inch binder containing every text message, every email, the video footage from the gala, and the voicemail from my grandmother. It also included a timeline I had constructed during sleepless nights at Elena's kitchen table, a chronological map showing exactly how my parents' requests for help coincided with their financial irregularities. We hand-delivered it to Agent Miller at the State Attorney General's office on a Tuesday morning. This is not just a defense, Thorne told her as he slid the binder across the metal desk. This is an indictment of the board's leadership. My client is not a co-conspirator. She is a victim of identity theft and familial extortion. Agent Miller took the binder. She didn't smile, but she nodded. We are scheduling a public hearing, she said. The Oversight Committee wants to review the Hearthstone Community Fund's license. If the board cannot prove proper governance, the state will dissolve the charity and seize its assets. When? I asked. 10 days, she said. The news broke the next day. The local paper ran the headline, State to investigate Hearthstone Fund, public hearing scheduled. My name wasn't in the headline, but it was in the article. Sources say the investigation focuses on the misappropriation of scholarship funds and the role of the foundation's treasurer, Lydia Griffin. The town of Maplewood was small enough that a headline like that didn't just inform people, it activated them, overnight. The atmosphere shifted. I felt it when I went to the grocery store to buy milk for Elena. Heads turned. Conversations stopped in the aisle. I saw a woman I had gone to high school with, a woman who had liked my photos on social media a week ago, turn her card around to avoid passing me. I wasn't Lydia anymore. I was the scandal. To some, I was the greedy daughter who had embezzled money meant for poor children. To others, I was the snitch who was tearing down a pillar of the community. I heard the whispers in the checkout line. I heard she bought a condo in the city with the money. I heard she is trying to send her own parents to jail because they cut her off. I kept my head down. I paid for my milk. I walked out. I realized then that the truth didn't matter to the crowd. They wanted a story, and my parents were better storytellers than I was. 2 days after the announcement, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt Kathy. Lydia, please, we are having a late Christmas dinner this Saturday. At my house, not your parents' place. Just family. No lawyers, no police. We want to start the new year with peace. Please come. Your mother is a wreck. I showed the text to Thorne. Don't go, he said immediately. It is a trap. They want to get you in a room without witnesses so they can work on you. I know it is a trap. I said, then why are you putting on your coat? Because I need them to say it. I said, I need them to make the offer they are dying to make, and I need the rest of the family to see them do it. I will have my phone recording. I added. Thorne sighed. Be careful. Lydia, desperate people are dangerous, Aunt Kathy's house was different from my parents' home. It was smaller, cluttered with knickknacks and photos of her grandchildren. It usually smelled of yeast rolls and laundry detergent. Tonight, it smelled of tension. I arrived at 6 o'clock. There were 4 cars in the driveway. My father's SUV was parked right behind Aunt Kathy's sedan. Blocking it in, I parked on the street. I wanted a clear exit. I walked up the path, clutching my purse against my side, inside. The recording app was already running. I had taped the phone to the inside of my blazer pocket so the microphone wouldn't be muffled. Aunt Kathy opened the door. She looked terrible. Her eyes were puffy, her skin splotchy. "Lydia," she whispered, pulling me into a hug that felt more like a restraint than an embrace. "Thank you for coming. Please, just be gentle." I didn't answer. I walked into the living room. They were all there, the same cast of characters from the first dinner. Minus Mr. Silas. My parents sat on the sofa, holding hands. My father wore a cardigan that looked too big for him. My mother was wearing black, as if she were in mourning. Uncle Dave stood by the window, staring out at the dark street. When I entered, my mother let out a small, strangled sob. "Lydia," she said, "my baby." She stood up and reached for me. I stepped back. "Hello, Mother." "Hello, Dad." My father stood up slowly. He looked at me with an expression of profound weariness. "Lydia, thank you for giving us this chance. We want to fix this. We want to be a family again. Let's eat first," Aunt Kathy said quickly, her voice high and brittle. I made lasagna. We moved to the dining room. The table was set with paper napkins and everyday plates. There was no pretense of grandeur tonight. This was the humble folks' routine. We ate in silence for 10 minutes. The only sound was the scraping of forks and the ticking of the clock. Finally, my father put his fork down. "Lydia," he began, "we have been doing a lot of thinking. We know we made mistakes. We put too much pressure on you. We blurred the lines between family and business. And for that, we are sorry." I looked at him. I waited. "But we also know that this legal situation is hurting everyone," he continued. "It is hurting the foundation. It is hurting the community. And it is going to hurt you. Lydia, a trial will destroy your career. Even if you win, the stain will never wash off." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a checkbook. He placed a folded piece of paper on the table. "We have liquidated some assets," he said. "Your mother's jewelry, some investments. We have put together a settlement for you." He slid the paper across the table. I looked at it. It wasn't a check. It was a trust agreement. Beneficiary, Lydia Griffin. Amount, $500,000. $500,000. I said, "It is your inheritance," my mother said softly. "We are giving it to you now, so you can start fresh. You can move away, buy a house, do whatever you want." "And what do I have to do?" I asked. My father produced a second document. It was a single page. "Just sign this," he said. "It is an affidavit. It simply states that you were aware of the transfers to the consulting firms and that you authorized them as short-term loans which are now being repaid." I stared at the paper. It was a confession. If I signed it, I would be admitting to authorizing the fraud. But because they were repaying it, the criminal charges might be dropped, leaving me with a tax liability and a destroyed reputation, while they walked away clean. "You want me to sell my name for $500,000? I said, "We want to save you." My mother insisted. "Lydia, listen to reason. The state doesn't care about you. They just want a conviction. If you fight this, you could go to jail. We are offering you a lifeboat." I looked around the table. Aunt Kathy was crying into her napkin. Uncle Dave was looking at the floor. I reached into my bag. I didn't take the pen my father was offering. I took out a sheet of paper I had typed that morning. "I have a statement." I said, "Lydia, don't—" My father started. I read aloud. My voice was steady, cutting through the thick, warm air of the room. "On December 24th, you told me to leave and never return. You claimed I was a liability to the family legacy. 5 minutes later, The police arrived at your home. On December 26th, you attempted to coerce me into signing a retroactive consulting agreement to cover up 3 years of embezzlement. On January 2nd, you contacted my employer and attempted to have me fired by claiming I was mentally unstable. I have reviewed the records. I know about the casino withdrawals. I know about the intercepted mail. I know about the mortgage on Grandma's cabin. I looked up. My mother's face had gone from tragic to stony. I am not signing your affidavit, I said, and I am not taking your money. The only thing I want is the truth. My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. The truth? He shouted. The truth is that you are an ungrateful, spiteful child who is willing to destroy her own parents to prove a point. We gave you everything. We paid for your college. We gave you a life. You gave me a role, I shouted back. You gave me a role to play so you could hide your crimes. Lydia, stop, Aunt Kathy screamed. She stood up, her chair tipping over backward. She was shaking. Stop it, Robert, she yelled at my father. Stop lying to her. My father turned on her. Shut up. Kathy, no, Kathy cried. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Lydia, they told us to do it. What? I asked. Years ago, Kathy sobbed. When you were in high school, Eleanor told us that you were fragile. She said you had problems. She said we had to treat you carefully. She said if you asked questions about money or the business, we were supposed to ignore you because it triggered your anxiety. I felt the room spin. They told the whole family I was crazy? I whispered. They said it was for your own good. Kathy said. They said we had to protect you from the stress. But now I see they weren't protecting you. They were isolating you. They wanted us to dismiss you so if you ever found out, nobody would believe you. The silence that followed was absolute. The mythology of the difficult daughter had just shattered. I wasn't difficult. I had been gaslit for 15 years. My mother stood up. Her face was a mask of cold fury. You are a fool. Kathy, she hissed. You just cost yourself your lease payments. She looked at me. You want the truth? Lydia? Fine. Here is the truth. You were never smart enough to run this family. You were just a signature, and now you are going to be nothing. Come on. Robert, she said. We are leaving. They walked out. My father grabbed the check and the affidavit from the table as he passed. The front door slammed, shaking the frame of the house. I stood there, looking at my aunt and uncle, the people who had watched me grow up, the people who had been paid to think I was broken. I am sorry, Kathy whispered. I picked up my purse. I know. I said, but sorry doesn't pay back the scholarship fund. I walked out into the night. The air was freezing, but it felt clean. The next morning, Agent Miller called me. Lydia, she said. Her voice was urgent. We need to meet. New information has come to light. I went to her office. Thorne met me there. Miller placed a file on the desk. We found the trigger. She said, the trigger? We were wondering why your parents moved so aggressively on Christmas Eve. She said, why the ultimatum? Why the rush to get you out of the house? We assumed it was because of the foreclosure notice on the cabin, but it was something else. She opened the file. On December 20th, 4 days before Christmas, the Attorney General's office received a whistleblower complaint. It was submitted anonymously, but it contained specific details about the scholarship fraud. A whistleblower? I asked. Who? We don't know yet. Miller said, but your parents found out about it. We found a text message on your father's phone from a contact at the courthouse, a clerk he used to play golf with. The clerk tipped him off that a complaint had been filed and that an investigation was imminent. I stared at the date. December 20th. They knew the police were coming. I said, they knew the investigation would start with the treasurer. With me? Exactly, Thorne said. The Christmas dinner wasn't an emotional break. It was a tactical evacuation. They needed to sever ties with you publicly so that when the police arrived, they could say, she's gone, she's erratic, she's a fugitive. They were setting you up to look like you had fled the jurisdiction. If I had left town, if I hadn't gone to Elena's, you would have looked guilty. Miller said, You would have looked like you were running with the money. It was a cold, calculated murder of my character. They hadn't just used me as a shield. They had tried to throw me into the fire to cover their retreat. That afternoon, I received a call from a number with a Cayman Islands area code. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. Ms. Griffin, this is an associate of Mr. Sterling. We understand you are in a difficult position. We have resources that can assist you. Documents can be misplaced. Servers can be wiped. But cooperation is required. If you continue to speak with the authorities, certain protections regarding your personal assets, protections we currently maintain, will be revoked. Think about your future. I saved the voicemail. I sent it to Thorne. I sent it to Miller. Mr. Sterling was the architect, the man who wrote the script. Now he was trying to bribe me, or threaten me. It wasn't entirely clear, but it confirmed one thing. This wasn't just a local scam. It was an organized criminal enterprise, and I was the loose thread that could unravel the whole sweater. My parents had one card left to play. 2 days before the hearing, a reporter from the Maplewood Gazette contacted Thorne. Your parents have invited the press to their home for a family reconciliation statement, Thorne told me. They want you to be there. They are telling the press that they have forgiven you and are ready to welcome you back into the fold if you apologize. It was a photo op, a trap designed to make them look benevolent and me look obstinate. If I don't go, they will take a picture of an empty chair. I said, they will say I refuse to make peace. Let them, Thorne said. We don't fight in the press. We fight in the hearing. I didn't go. I sat in Elena's living room and watched the live stream on the newspaper's website. My parents stood on their front porch. My mother was wearing a modest blue dress. My father had his arm around her. They looked like the victims of a tragedy. We love our daughter. My father told the reporter, we know she is troubled. We know she has made mistakes with the foundation's accounts, but we are a family. We are ready to forgive her. We just want her to come home and get the help she needs. The reporter asked, where is Lydia today? My mother wiped a tear. We don't know, she said. She refuses to speak to us. She is under the influence of bad advice. I turned off the laptop. They were good. They were so good. Even knowing the truth, part of me wanted to believe them. They looked so sincere. But then I remembered the text message about the clerk. I remembered the intercepted mail. Thorne released a statement an hour later. It was short. Lydia Griffin declines to participate in public disputes. She supports full accountability for the misuse of charitable funds and the protection of the intended beneficiaries. She looks forward to presenting the facts at the upcoming hearing. It was dry, it was boring, and it was the only thing I could say. The board of directors of the Hearthstone Community Fund held an emergency meeting that night. Faced with the impending state hearing and the packet of coercion that Miller had shared with them, they had no choice. They voted to remove Robert and Eleanor Griffin from their leadership positions. Pending the outcome of the investigation, it was a victory, but it felt hollow. The town didn't see it as justice. They saw it as a tragedy. I heard the comments at the gas station. Poor Robert, losing his foundation because his daughter couldn't handle the books. I heard she turned state's evidence to save her own skin. The narrative hadn't fully flipped. The town wanted a villain, and it was easier to blame the cold, childless, corporate daughter than the beloved couple who threw the best parties in town. I understood then that I might never be vindicated, not fully. Even if I won in court, I would lose in the court of public opinion. I would always be the woman who destroyed the Hearthstone Fund. I had to be okay with that. I had to choose truth over popularity. The night before the hearing, the snow stopped. The air was still and sharp. I was staying at Elena's, but I drove past my apartment to check the mail. I hadn't slept there in 2 weeks, but I needed to feel like I still had a home. There was a package on the porch, a small cardboard box. I didn't touch it. I called Thorne. Is it ticking? He asked. No, it's small. Shoebox size. Open it. But take photos first. I took a photo. I cut the tape with my keys. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, were 4 glass ornaments. I recognized them instantly. They were from my childhood. A glass bear, a snowman with a chipped nose, a glittery star, and a baby's first Christmas bulb with Lydia 1993 painted on it in gold script. These were the ornaments I had asked for years ago, the ones my mother said had been lost in a move. There was a note on top. It was written in my mother's elegant, looping handwriting. Lydia, I found these in the attic. I remember how much you loved them. I remember how happy you were when you were little, before you got so angry. Before you decided to hurt us. You can still stop this. You can still come home. But if you walk into that hearing room tomorrow and destroy us, remember that you are destroying the only people who ever really knew you. We made you. Lydia, do not forget that. Love, Mom. I picked up the glass bear. It was fragile, hollow. If I squeezed it, it would shatter into 1,000 sharp pieces. We made you. It was a threat wrapped in nostalgia. It was a reminder that I was their creation, and that they believed they had the right to unmake me. But they were wrong. They hadn't made me. They had made a prop. They had made a shield. The woman holding the box, the woman who had tracked the wire transfers, confronted the bookkeeper, and recorded the threats. They didn't make her. I made her. I made her out of necessity. I made her out of the wreckage of their lies. I put the note in an evidence bag. I put the ornaments back in the box. I brought the box inside. I didn't put the ornaments on a tree. I put them in the closet, in the dark. Tomorrow. The hearing would begin. Tomorrow. The script would end. I went to sleep, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't dream about them. I dreamed about the cabin. I dreamed about the lake. I dreamed about deep, cold water that was finally perfectly clear. The hearing took place in room 304 of the State Office Building, a windowless chamber that smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. It was not a courtroom with mahogany benches and oil paintings of judges. It was a functional, bureaucratic space with industrial carpet and rows of folding chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. I arrived 20 minutes early. Marcus Thorne walked beside me, his briefcase acting as a physical barrier between me and the dozen or so reporters gathered in the hallway. I wore a navy suit, crisp and unadorned. I wore no jewelry. I pulled my hair back tight. I wanted to look like a blank slate. I wanted to look like the paper trail I was about to present. The room was divided. On the left sat the board of directors for the Hearthstone Community Fund, looking uncomfortable in their expensive suits. On the right, a table was reserved for the witnesses. In the center, a panel of 3 administrative judges from the State Oversight Committee sat behind a raised dais. My parents arrived 5 minutes before the start time. They made an entrance. They always did. My father wore a soft gray suit that made him look approachable, almost grandfatherly. My mother wore a pale blue dress with a high collar, a cross necklace resting visibly against her chest. She held onto his arm as if she might faint without his support. They walked past the reporters with their heads bowed, performing a masterclass in dignified suffering. They did not look at me. The hearing began with the drone of a clerk reading the docket number. In the matter of the Hearthstone Community Fund, inquiry into governance and financial compliance. I was the first witness called. I walked to the witness chair. I sat down. I placed my hands on my lap. They were not shaking. Ms. Griffin, the lead commissioner, began. He was a bald man with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. You are listed as the treasurer of the Hearthstone Community Fund in filings from 2021 to the present. Is this correct? No, sir. I said. My voice was low but clear. I am listed on the documents, but I did not hold the position. Please explain, he said. My name was used to open accounts and authorize filings without my informed consent. I said, I did not attend board meetings. I did not vote on resolutions. I did not have access to the bank ledgers until 14 days ago. A murmur went through the room. I saw my father lean over and whisper something to their lawyer, a high-priced litigator named Mr. Vance. Mr. Vance stood up for cross-examination. He buttoned his jacket. He smiled at me, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Ms. Griffin, he said, You are a logistics manager for a major shipping firm. You manage budgets in the millions of dollars. Is that correct? Yes. So you are a financially literate woman. You understand what a signature means. I do. Mr. Vance picked up a piece of paper. Then can you explain why your signature appears on over 50 checks issued by the foundation? Are you claiming someone forged your hand? I looked at the paper. It was a check to Greenleaf Consulting. I am claiming that my signature was obtained through deception. I said, my father would present me with stacks of documents at family gatherings. He would tell me they were insurance forms, or tax writers for my car, or medical proxies. He would cover the header of the document. He would rush me. Mr. Vance chuckled. He turned to the audience. So your testimony is that you, a 33-year-old executive, simply signed whatever your father put in front of you without reading it? That seems unlikely. It relies on trust. I said, I trusted my father. And now you don't? Now I have read the documents. I said, Mr. Vance tried to paint me as incompetent. He tried to paint me as a bitter daughter trying to shift the blame for her own negligence. But I didn't take the bait. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I simply repeated the facts. I did not have the login credentials for the bank account. I said, I did not have a key to the post office box where the statements were sent. I said, I did not know the vendors. When I stepped down, I felt lighter. I hadn't won yet, but I hadn't cracked. Then, it was my parents' turn. My father took the stand first. He looked at the commissioners with a wide, open expression. I love my daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We wanted to involve her in the family legacy. We thought giving her this responsibility would help her feel connected to us. She has always been somewhat distant. The commissioner looked at a file. Mr. Griffin, you claim your daughter was the active treasurer. You claim she managed the vendor relationships. Yes, sir, my father said. Lydia is brilliant. She set up the entire payment structure. Then can you explain the IP logs? The commissioner asked. My father blinked. The what? The Internet Protocol logs, the commissioner said. We subpoenaed the access records for the bank accounts. Every single transfer to the shell companies was initiated from an IP address registered to your home internet service. My father shifted in his chair. Well, Lydia came over for dinner often. She worked from our house. The commissioner held up a sheet of paper. We cross-referenced the dates. On November 12th, a transfer of $25,000 was made from your home IP address. On that date, Lydia Griffin was in Seattle for a work conference. We have her flight records and her hotel receipt. The room went silent. My father's face turned a shade of pink. She must have given me the password. He stammered, She probably called me and walked me through it. She is very controlling. So you admit you made the transfer? The commissioner asked. I don't recall that specific day. My father said, I am just saying. Lydia was in charge. The contradictions began to pile up like drifted snow. My mother took the stand next. She tried a different tactic. She tried to play the victim of a complex system. I don't understand computers, she said, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. I just wanted to help the children. Lydia told us she was handling the compliance. If there were errors, it is because we trusted her expertise. Mrs. Griffin, the commissioner said, why was your daughter's mail forwarded to a P.O. box paid for by the foundation? My mother froze. We were holding it for her. She travels so much. We didn't want her bills to get lost. For 6 months? The commissioner asked. Even when she was in town? My mother looked at the audience. She looked at the reporters. She looked for a friendly face, but she found none. We were trying to help her, she cried out, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. She is disorganized. She is unstable. We were protecting her. By intercepting her bank statements? The commissioner asked. My mother didn't answer. She just wept into her handkerchief, but the sound was thin and unconvincing. Then came the surprise. Agent Miller stood up. The state calls Janice Miller to the stand. A ripple of shock went through the room. My parents turned around in their chairs. They looked at the back of the room where Janice had been sitting. Hidden behind a pillar, Janice walked to the front. She looked terrified. She clutched her purse with both hands. But she walked steadily. She took the oath. Ms. Miller, the commissioner said, you were the bookkeeper for the Hearthstone Community Fund for 10 years. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Did Lydia Griffin ever instruct you to make payments to vendors? Janice looked at me. She offered a small, sad smile. No, sir, she said. I never spoke to Lydia about business. Not once. Then who instructed you? Robert and Eleanor Griffin? She said. Can you explain the nature of the vendor payments? Janice took a deep breath. She reached into her bag and pulled out the spreadsheet, the same one she had given me in the coffee shop. They weren't vendors. She said, her voice trembled, then steadied. They were personal expenses. Greenleaf Consulting was the landscape architect for their backyard. Summit Solutions was the tuition for their niece's private school. Apex Admin was just cash. Cash? Yes, sir. Mr. Griffin would ask for withdrawals. He said it was for discretionary charitable giving, but he always asked for it before he went on trips. To Las Vegas, to Atlantic City. My father stood up. That is a lie, he shouted. She is a disgruntled employee. We fired her for incompetence. Sit down. Mr. Griffin, the commissioner barked. Janice didn't flinch. She kept reading. And the scholarship fund, she said. The Kevin Morris grant, the Sarah Jenkins grant. The money never went to the schools. It went to a holding company owned by Mr. Griffin. The room was buzzing now. The reporters were typing furiously on their laptops. The board members on the left side of the room were whispering to each other, looking pale. Janice looked at my parents. They told me Lydia knew. She said quietly, they told me Lydia approved everything, but I knew she didn't, because whenever Lydia came over, they hid the books. She looked at the commissioners. I went along with it because I needed the job. She said, I have a sick husband. I was afraid, but I won't lie anymore. Lydia didn't steal a dime. They did. When Janice stepped down, the energy in the room had shifted completely. My parents were no longer the aggrieved elders. They were the accused. Agent Miller called one more witness to the stand, or rather, she introduced a deposition. We have a sworn statement from Meredith Vance. She announced, the sister of Eleanor Griffin. My mother gasped. Meredith, Agent Miller read the statement. It detailed the $20,000 loan my aunt had received to stay silent about construction kickbacks 10 years ago. It detailed the pattern of hush money. It detailed the moral rot that had infested the family for a decade. The evidence was overwhelming. It wasn't just bad bookkeeping. It was a criminal enterprise built on the exploitation of family loyalty. The commissioner looked at me. Ms. Griffin, he said, you have the right to make a closing statement before we deliberate. I stood up. I walked to the podium. I looked at my parents. They were staring at the table. My father's face was gray. My mother was picking at a loose thread on her dress, her eyes vacant. I could have screamed at them. I could have told the room about the Christmas dinner, about the cruelty, about the way they had made me feel small for 30 years, but I didn't. That was their story. I was writing a new one. I turned to the audience. I looked at the reporters. I looked at the camera at the back of the room. I am not here to talk about my family, I said. My voice filled the room, steady and calm. The tragedy here is not that a daughter was betrayed by her parents. The tragedy is that a community was betrayed by its leaders. I picked up the file Mrs. Higgins had given me. Kevin Morris wanted to be an HVAC technician. I said, he was promised a scholarship. He bought a tie for a gala. He shook my father's hand. And then the check never came. Because the money for his tools was used to pay for a luxury suite in Cabo San Lucas. I saw the reporters nodding. There are dozens of Kevins, I continued. There are donors who gave $5, $10, $1,000, believing they were building a better town. Their trust was weaponized. I looked at the board of directors. I am asking the state not just to dissolve the current leadership, but to appoint an independent administrator to track down every stolen dollar. I am asking for restitution. I am asking that the assets of the directors be seized and used to pay the scholarships that were promised. I paused. I want my name cleared. Yes, but more importantly, I want the Hearthstone Fund to do what it promised to do. I want the money to go to the people who need it. I sat down. The room was silent. It was a respectful silence, the kind of silence that follows the truth. But my parents had one last pivot. Mr. Vance, their lawyer, stood up. He looked desperate. "Commissioners," he said, "while the accounting is messy, we must remember the context. This is a family dispute. Ms. Griffin is clearly motivated by personal animus. She was cut off from the family at Christmas. This is revenge." He held up a piece of paper. "We have a statement from the family," he said, stating that Lydia has always been difficult, that she has always wanted to destroy her parents' success. Agent Miller stood up. "Objection," she said. She held up a document in a plastic evidence bag. "If we are talking about the Christmas timeline," she said, "the state would like to enter one final exhibit." She walked to the dais and handed the document to the commissioners. Then she projected it onto the screen for the room to see. It was the draft press release, the one blaming me for the administrative errors. "Please look at the timestamp," Agent Miller said. I looked at the screen. Created, December 24th, 4:15 p.m. Agent Miller turned to the room. "This document, which outlines a plan to blame Lydia Griffin for the missing funds, was created at 4:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve," she said. She turned to my parents. According to police reports and witness testimony, the argument at the dinner table, the ultimatum where you told Lydia to leave and never return, did not happen until 6:30 p.m. The room gasped. "You didn't kick her out because she was difficult," Agent Miller said, her voice hard as iron. "You wrote the script to frame her 2 hours before she even arrived at your house. You invited her to dinner solely to stage a breakup so you could execute this press release. It was the final nail. The timestamp proved premeditation. It proved that the emotional scene at the dinner table was just theater. It proved that their love was a lie, and their cruelty was a strategy." My father put his head in his hands. My mother stared at the screen, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't understand how the machine she had built had turned against her. "Mr." Vance sat down. He had no more questions. The commissioners deliberated for 10 minutes. They didn't even leave the room. They just huddled together, whispering. Then, the lead commissioner spoke. "The board finds that the current leadership of the Hearthstone Community Fund has engaged in gross negligence, self-dealing, and fraudulent governance," he said. "We are ordering the immediate removal of Robert and Eleanor Griffin from all positions. We are freezing their personal assets pending a full forensic audit. We are referring this matter to the Criminal Division for prosecution." He looked at me. "Ms. Griffin," he said, "the board finds no evidence of your wrongdoing. Your name is cleared from the liability of these accounts. We thank you for your cooperation." He banged his gavel. Hearing adjourned. The sound of the gavel was like a gunshot. Then, the noise returned. Reporters shouted questions. People stood up, but the noise was different. It wasn't directed at me. I watched as the reporters swarmed the table where my parents sat. "Mr. Griffin, are you going to prison? Mrs. Griffin, did you steal the scholarship money? How do you explain the timestamp?" My parents looked small. They looked old. They looked like what they were. 2 grifters who had run out of road. I stood up. I didn't look back at them. I walked down the aisle, past the board members who wouldn't meet my eye, past the audience who stared at me with a new kind of curiosity, not judgment, but respect. I walked out of the double doors and into the hallway. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of floor wax, but underneath that, it smelled like oxygen. It smelled like freedom. 2 weeks later, I received the official letter from the district attorney. I was not being charged. I was listed as a cooperating witness. My parents were not so lucky. The investigation had expanded. The IRS was involved now. The FBI was looking into the wire fraud. They were facing indictments on 12 counts. They hadn't been arrested yet. White-collar crime moved slowly, but their passports had been surrendered, and their accounts were seized. They were living in the house, but the lights were going out, room by room. The country club membership was gone. The friends had vanished. The reputation they had killed for was dead. I was back at work. My boss, Mike, had apologized. He gave me a promotion. Crisis management skills, he called it. I was living in my apartment again. I had taken the ornaments out of the closet and put them on a small shelf in my living room. They didn't hurt me anymore. They were just glass. On a Tuesday evening, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Dad. I hadn't spoken to them since the hearing. I debated not answering, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the end. I answered, "Hello, Lydia." His voice was a ghost. It sounded hollow, scraped out. "Hello, Dad. We are losing the house," he said. "The lawyers. They cost too much. And the assets are frozen. We are going to have to move, maybe into a rental." I didn't say anything. "Why did you do it?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was just bewildered. "We were a team. We could have fixed it. If you had just signed the paper, we could have kept everything." I closed my eyes. He still didn't get it. He still thought the money was the point. It wasn't a team. "Dad," I said, "it was a hostage situation." There was a long silence. I could hear my mother crying in the background. A low, rhythmic sound. "You could have saved us," he whispered. "You were the only one who could have saved us." I looked out my window at the city skyline, glittering in the winter night. I saw the lights of thousands of homes, thousands of families. "I saved the people you used," I said. I didn't wait for his response. I didn't wait for him to beg, or blame, or bargain. I pressed the red button. The line went dead. I put the phone down on the table. The silence in my apartment was absolute. It was peaceful. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I drank it standing up, feeling the cool liquid move through me. I was 33 years old. I had no inheritance. I had no parents to go home to for the holidays. But I had my name. It was clean. It was mine. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a long journey into the shadows of family loyalty and the light of truth. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. If you enjoyed Lydia's story and want to hear more tales of justice and resilience, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. Share your thoughts in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time.